Good morning, everyone. My name is David Ainsworth. I'm the head of communications for the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I'd like to welcome you to this first press briefing of the fifth meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This briefing is coming to you from the Press Center, room 220D at the Palais des Congrès. And those of you who are looking at this online on Interactio or on the CBD.int/live channel, the YouTube streaming as well. We'll be holding these briefings every morning between 9:15 and 9:45 Montreal time during the meeting of the working group. And we will also have briefings during the meeting of COP15 that will follow. Just letting people know online, if you're following, the chat feature in Interactio is not activated this morning. However, if you decide to follow on the cbd.int/live link, you will be able to ask me questions by the chat that way, and I will follow. I'm all set up in this case. So first of all, thank you very much for joining me. I'll just let you know for today, we're about to start the fifth meeting of this open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. A bit of background about the group itself. Back at COP14 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, the Conference of the Parties mandated that a post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework was to be negotiated and created in time for COP15. To prepare for those negotiations, an open-ended working group was created with the mandate to look at, to transformational change in order to achieve the vision of the convention, the 2050 vision, which is living in harmony with nature. The working group is led by two co-chairs, Basile Van Havre of Canada and Francis Ogwal of Uganda. The two of them have managed and steered the process through 5 meetings of the working group. The first meeting of the working group was held in Nairobi, Kenya, and that was an exchange of views and looking at ways that the framework would be set up. That was followed by another meeting of the working group, the second one held in Rome at FAO headquarters, where indeed parties put together, I think, what could have been called a laundry list, an entire extensive collection of elements they wish to have included in the text. And then, as we all know, the intervention of the COVID-19 pandemic meant that all activities went online. The process then itself also went online with a variety of informal consultations at regional and global levels, consultation with stakeholders as well, putting together further inputs. This led to the creation of a zero draft of the framework that was then looked at by parties. Parties have had a chance to meet together finally after a number of years, earlier this year in Geneva for the third meeting of the open-ended working group. And that meeting was held concurrently with meetings of the subsidiary bodies of the convention, the scientific body, and the implementation body. And at that time, that's when delegates really took upon themselves to look at this framework text, to review it, to provide inputs and ideas. And from there, a document heavily annotated with a lot of different options was created. Governments then, just a few months later, in Nairobi, Kenya, met at the fourth meeting of the open-ended working group and again engaged on the text. They looked at what was present, what needed to be worked on. In essence, they were able to come to consensus on a full consensus on one of the targets. I believe it's target 12, relating to the urban greenery and urban spaces. But the others remained heavily bracketed, as we say in this process, which means that there was no consensus in a lot of other areas. To that end, governments had decided that in order to prepare for COP15, they held a series of informal discussions from, I believe it was the end of September to just the beginning of October. Those informal discussions were extremely productive, and as a result of that, the text was highly streamlined. And the text that came from that group, that informal group, is largely the basis for the discussions that'll be taking place over the next 3 days. The framework will be discussed between now until the 5th. The framework is based on an overall mission that's under discussion, a number of goals. Right now, we're looking at about 22 some targets. Those targets could change in the next few days. At the current time, the governments are looking at something around the area of what we call about 900 brackets, which is 900 instances where they've got to come up with ways of consolidating the text. That is the work of the working group over these next 3 days, to look at the text, look at these goals, look at all these targets, and to come with a text that is as streamlined as possible to take it on to COP15. The meeting will begin today at 10 a.m. The meeting is going to have very little in the way of procedural substance. When they open the meeting, they will look at the question of the organization of work. And the organization of work, to let you know, will be mostly in what are called contact groups. Now, a contact group is a small negotiating group where representatives of different regions, and it can be a few countries or a number of countries, are invited to engage in very close, very intense text-based discussions and negotiations. In these contact groups, non-state actors or stakeholders observer organizations can certainly attend. Any inputs that they would provide, however, are inputs that would have to be welcomed by other members of the contact groups. I'll talk a little bit about what the contact groups are going to look like in this meeting. It's important to note that the discussions in contact groups are not public. So you members of the media who will be on site or who will be following discussions, the things that happen in the contact groups are not public. They're not for attribution. The reporting on what happens there is something you'll hear from me at the end of the day or from any delegates who are in a position to comment in that case. So the group will meet in its plenary session today. We'll be hearing from reports on the co-chairs. The co-chairs will report on how this informal discussion group proceeded, the nature of those discussions. We'll also be hearing from the chair of the subsidiary body on science, technology, and technological assessment, Mr. Hezekiel Benitez of Mexico. Hezekiel will report on the work that the SBSTA conducted also in the intersessional period. SBSTA has an important role for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. SBSTA is providing the scientific basis and framework for the framework, but it is also providing work on the suite of indicators for monitoring this framework. Something that is to make this post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework unique and different from its predecessor is that we're looking at a much more complete series of indicators for monitoring. Those indicators are meant to be created in a way so that they can help link global targets with national activities. And also these indicators are meant to start measuring data and information right now, not years down the line. So SBSTA has been engaged in a process to look at that. There's a recommendation of an ad hoc technical expert group that will also provide work on those indicators. Hezekiel Benitez will talk about the nature of that work in the plenary. We will also have a report from Charlotte Sundqvist, who is the chair of the subsidiary body in implementation. The subsidiary body in implementation was tasked to provide a lot of inputs to the Global Biodiversity Framework. I think the thing that I'll most notably say is that it was tasked to come up with discussions on the resource mobilization and financial aspects of it, identifying mechanisms, opportunities for resource mobilization in support of the framework and overall work of the convention. Work on that has taken place in the intersessional period and will continue to take place, and Charlotte will give us information about what is going to take place for that area as well. After we hear from the reports of those, we will then also take a look. Pardon me, I'm scrolling through my document here. It's a long choreography. Following those reports, we will have the governments tackle the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. However, in the plenary session, they will not discuss the framework. They are then expected to announce and determine the contact groups that will look at the other information that will take place. It is expected, again, we'll have to see what happens in the plenary, it's expected that 5 contact groups will be named. The first contact group will focus on goals A, B, and C of the framework. It's expected that the co-leads for that will be Mr. Gao Zhang of China and Mr. Norbert Berlocher of Switzerland. Contact group number 2 will be focusing on targets 1, 4, 5, and 6. And these targets are the ones that focus on reducing threats to biodiversity. That contact group is expected to have co-leads of Tiona Karchava from Georgia and Rosemary Patterson of New Zealand. Contact Group 3 will focus on targets 9, 10, and 11, which are on meeting people's needs through sustainable use and benefit sharing. So identifying ways that we're ensuring that whatever we do for the protection of biodiversity, we're still dealing with human well-being as well. The co-leads for that group are expected to be Gillian Guthrie and Gabriel Obermeyer of Austria. Pardon me, Gillian Guthrie is from Jamaica. Contact Group 4 will be focusing on targets 14 through 16 and 17, also targets 20, 21, and 22, and also any new targets that are proposed. They'll be looking at tools and solutions for implementation and mainstreaming that case. And it's expected that the co-leads for that will be Ann Teller and Jorge Murillo. Jorge Murillo is from Colombia and Teller is from the European Union. And then finally, Contact Group 5 will be expected to focus on sections A and B of the framework, something called B bis, which is an alternative to section B, sections D, and then also sections E, H, and I and K. These sections are sections that deal with either the goals and looking at this, but also looking at questions of the support mechanisms for implementing that. And though co-leads for this expected to be Carolina Caceres of Canada and Marie-May Muzungaile of the Seychelles will look at that as well. These contact groups will be meeting either some of them immediately after the plenary today from 10 to 1. Others will meet in the afternoon. For this meeting, it's important that we have no more than 2 contact groups meeting in parallel. This is so that delegates from smaller delegation sizes can attend all of the meetings without having to be too divided as well. It's also possible that these groups may establish even smaller groups called Friends of the Co-Chairs to have these discussions following a little further as well. So they'll proceed along that work, and it's expected that that work will meet just pretty much immediately. The one other thing I want to mention that plenary will cover this morning is agenda item 5 on digital sequence information on genetic resources, also known as DSI. So one other mandate of this open-ended working group is that they're meant to look at how can we address this question of digital sequence information in the context of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Without going into very technical details, digital sequence information represents either encoded data that describes genetic resources. It could also explore some additional derivative data that comes from this. Digital sequence information could also include some of the knowledge required to use genetic resources. So digital sequence information is not the genetic resource itself, but its associated data. The questions before us are to understand the full scope of what is digital sequence information, given that it's a very new area under the convention. And the second thing is how will this be dealt with under the Global Biodiversity Framework, and indeed under existing mechanisms such as the Nagoya Protocol and access and benefit sharing. So that's another item that will be covered. Very important, this aspect of DSI deals with equitable sharing to the benefits from the use of genetic resources, and the third aspect of the convention. And there have been intensive discussions looking at that as well. So that will be covered as well, looking at the report and the ways forward, and then the groups will be looking forward. What I've just told you is what is expected. You'll have to follow the plenary at 10 o'clock to see what is finally decided as far as breaking into the different contact groups. Members of the media who are here in the room, or members of the media who follow online, you can follow the plenary on Interactio and the YouTube channels as well. So that means you'll have activity starting at about 10 o'clock this morning. The working group will continue its discussions all day today, all day tomorrow, and they're expected to finish their work on the 5th. They have to finish their work on the 5th because, as you know, the meeting of the Conference of Parties starts with a ceremonial opening on the 6th of December right away. I'm going to just turn to the YouTube channel and see if there are any questions that have come up on the chat. I don't see anything there right now. We'll wait. So anyone who's following on YouTube and is interested in providing any questions, please do. I'll also be welcome to take any questions from anyone on the floor. Thanks very much. The people on the floor, many of them are colleagues who understand what's already going on. Okay, very good. Thank you. We're a little bit ahead of time, so just letting you know that we will be holding these briefings every morning from 9:15 to 9:45. We will also have these briefings held during the meeting of the Conference of the Parties as well. I'll remind media that the opening press conference for COP15 will take place at 9 a.m. on December 6th. It'll be a 1-hour-long conference featuring the participation of the president of COP15, Minister of Environment and Ecology, Huang Rongqiu. It will involve the Minister of Environment and Climate Change Canada, Mr. Stephen Guilbeault from Canada, Inger Anderson, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Environment Program will also be present, as well as Elizabeth Maruma-Mrema, the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. They will be providing remarks and they'll be taking questions. Anyone who wishes to give questions for that meeting, however, please do submit these in advance because we expect to have a lot and we have to manage some of the questions as well. I have a question. Oh, it's Stephen Leahy. Stephen, good to see that you're still following us as well as I. Any takeaways beyond the targets? Well, I mean, when the meeting is finished here, the expectation is that we'll have as much clean text as possible on the targets, but also agreement on the mission and the goals on the target, including any milestones, because there's been a debate on whether or not milestones should be included. And then also discussion on those further sections at the end of it, sections, F, G, H, et cetera. That'll be looking at support mechanisms, because an important part of how we move forward on this is that. But the expectation, Stephen, is that when this meeting is done, this text should be as clean as possible to be discussed and agreed at the COP. I think, however, everyone does expect that notwithstanding whatever progress they make in these next 3 days, the COP will be largely covered with looking at further refinement of other disease texts. Great. Thanks very much. Any other questions in the room here? Do we need, actually, I think maybe we should, could someone grab a mic for Terry? Because I'll hear him, but I don't think the people online will hear him. Pardon me, everyone online, we'll just bring a mic here.
David, just wondering if you have an anticipated time for the reports of the co-chairs.
Oh, the reports of co-chairs. According to my choreography, they'll come very, very quickly. So I think anyone who's following this, you should probably attempt to start following really at about 10:05 and look at that, because typically in these plenaries, the usual addresses and welcomes and statements by regional groups is not being carried out this time. So they'll be getting to work right away. I think their hope is that they can finish all of these other elements of discussions within half an hour, 45 minutes. And the report of the co-chairs, from what I've seen, is going to be very, very short. They're going to talk about what happened in the informal discussions and characterize how those are going to be moved forward. Thanks. Do you have another one?
Yeah. Will the COP accept a text with brackets?
Yes, the COP will accept a text with brackets. It's usual in the convention process to bring text with brackets to the COP. We try to work against it, both the parties and the Secretariat. So when a subsidiary body produces a recommendation, there's a great deal of work to move things forward as a full consensus. But in something like the Global Biodiversity Framework, that's exceedingly hard. I can recall that when we negotiated the strategic plan for biodiversity back at the Nagoya COP, it also came to the COP with a number of brackets. And so it is expected. We just need to move forward on, however, because the COP has a heavy agenda, there's lots to discuss, and if we have to take a lot of time to cover this framework, it's going to be very challenging. Thanks. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions online. I'll take a look and see if there's anything else. I'm going to wait a minute or two because I note that the YouTube stream I see here appears to be at least 30 to 45 seconds behind, so we'll give it another chance. Okay, great. Those who are following online, because I know we do have a group of 32 of them, if any of you are media who will be coming to Montreal or into the International Media Center, the Media Center will open at 8 in the morning. We'll easily stay open here, I think at least till 8 p.m. On the other evenings here. We'll have open work desks for people. During the working group, however, we don't expect any press conferences taking place. That'll all start on the 6th of December. Okay, so I think that's all I've got for you today. So those who are following online, if you have any questions, I would invite you to send an email to myself. That's david.ainsworth@un.org, david.ainsworth@un.org, and we'll attempt to answer questions in the next few days. So thank you very much. We actually suddenly have a number of questions coming on the screen. I knew it would take a little while. Katrin Einhorn. Hi, Katrin. Katrin's with the New York Times. How many brackets are manageable to bring to COP? I don't think we set sort of a certain number or bar, but I think the question is can we, even if we have brackets throughout the document, is there at least a basis for building common ground. So it's possible to have brackets in a target or an aspect of a decision, but if it looks like the options are either reasonably chosen from or parties on the base to resolve it, that would be fine. But I think it's safe to say that the document as it stands now, with some 900 brackets, is not manageable, and the parties really have to move forward on that as well. Thank you. Sarah Schoenhart. Hi, Sarah. I can't remember what organization you're from. How can we submit questions ahead of the press conference on the 6th? So, Sarah, I think we sent a media advisor a few days ago on this one, but please send your questions by email to myself, david.ainsworth@un.org. And there's also Terry Collins, but Terry, I can't remember your email address by heart. So I think what I'll do is we'll just send another email out to everybody as well. But certainly send them to me. I would invite people to send their questions today if possible, so we can manage things to put it forward. Thanks very much. Dare I wait a few minutes and see if there's another unblockage? Terry, go ahead. Oh, can we have the mic to Terry, please?
Just you might want to just correct the time of the ceremony opening. We've moved ahead 30 minutes. So.
Right. Thank you very much, Terry. So those of you in the media who would have received the media advisory a couple of days ago about the opening ceremony on the 6th, there's been a change in the time. So the ceremony that we announced at 3:45, it is at 3:15. So the opening ceremony opens at 3:15. Those of you who are coming here to Montreal for the opening ceremony from the media, I would advise you to get here earlier because we'll have to organize your seating for that. But 3:15 is the starting time for that opening ceremony. That opening ceremony will indeed be streamed on Interactio and YouTube, and we also have a broadcast feed provided by the host broadcaster here that will be made available to you for that particular opening as well. Great, thanks. Good, I see some more questions here. Juliana Villone. Hello, Juliana. Can we expect multiple new drafts over the next few days or just one new text at the end? So I think what you would see is the contact groups, there's a couple of options. As a result of their discussions today, they may produce non-papers, which will be sort of additional advances of the text and publish them over the evening, over the next day. And you'll see those documents on our website. So when you go to the conference site under working group, you'll see those available. So I think we could expect to see some updates. However, the specific modalities of each contact group really is left up to the chairs. So some of them may publish a non-paper if it's ready. Certainly, if they haven't made much advances, they won't publish a non-paper as well. So at the end, but certainly you can be guaranteed at the end of this open-ended working group, there will be a new text of the framework is what will be advanced to the COP for consideration. Thanks. I must confess I'm not entirely sure what to do, if I should wait for a few minutes for something to deblock. We have a few more minutes here. Let me just hold on. Maybe as we're waiting, just one more bit of information. Those of you who are following on Interactio, we will be enabling a feature over the next days that will, at a minimum, allow you to provide your questions in the chat Interactio. So that'll make things a little bit easier. Although it seems like the YouTube channel is also working fairly well as well. Okay, I think that's about it, and I've only got a few more minutes anyway. Thank you very much for joining us here on site or also online. As I said, send me another questions at the time going, and we'll have a few minutes here to prepare for the opening of this 5th meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Be safe. Those of you on site, remember to put your masks back on, or make sure you got them on here. Thanks very much. Very good. Take care. Bye.